Ligayang araw po. Kita ulit tayo. Dami akong trabaho, kaya nag-asynchronous tayo for a while ano. Saka siyempre exam ninyo, che-check ko pa yung inyong mga papers by the way. Sa dami naman ng aking trabaho. Ay naku. Ganun tingnan muna natin yung ating, Mentimeter. Okay, Mentimeter. UP students generally appreciate Turing's test. Baka malamang-lamang ang alam ng ibang estudyante yung Turing's test, baka, palaman sa tinapay. Kay 7 ang nagsabi not sure, and then, 3 says agree, 1 disagrees. UP students in general know what contradictions the traditional concept of mind brings with it. 5 agree, alam niyo kung ano yung traditional concept, versus, something else. Sige nga. There is no other alternative in interpreting near-death experience except to assume that humans are capable of out-of-body experience. Unang-una, alam niyo baga kung ano yung near-death experience, Wikipedia niyo ngayon, tingnan niyo kung ano ibig sabihin niyan. Humans have souls. 10 say yes, 3 say not sure, walang nagdi-disagree. Ala, ay siya. Doon sa isang klase, merong mga jablo na they disagree. Kayo wala. Sige nga. Kababait nyo. Okay. Review muna tayo. At yung review natin related sa topic natin ngayon. Ano? Ang ating mga pag-uusapan. Pag-uusapan natin si Alan Turing. Bakit? Turing's Test. Turing's Test, pinag-usapan natin yan. Turing's Test. And then, pag-uusapan natin si Rene Descartes. Yan, bakit? Wala lang. Gusto ko lang pakita sa inyo. Marami akong alam. And then, ito yung target natin, si Gilbert Ryle. Si Gilbert Ryle ay kabatch ni Alan Turing, kabatch ni Claude Shannon. Sila ang mga nagtayo ng ating mundo ngayon. Yung ating mental model ng mundo ngayon ay very much dependent on their works. Ito yung mga magkakabatch Si Claude Shannon, salamat dun sa kanyang invention ng, if you remember, invention ng circuit boards in the 1930s, 1936. Okay. Si Alan Turing, importante bakit? Si Alan Turing ay ang umimbento ng computer as we know it, yung kanyang concept ng universal machine. In the 1930s to 1940s. 1930s kasi pinaliwanag niya yung theoretical possibility ng computers, which he called the universal machine. Of course, based on the work of Claude Shannon. And 1940s kasi, ginawa niya ng actual computer that worked and saved 12 million lives during the Second World War. Nakwento ko na yan, And then, of course, Gilbert Ryle. Bakit? Mamaya paliwanag ko sa inyo. Si Gilbert Ryle, dahil doon sa kanyang contribution ng philosophy of mind, as a discipline, contribution niya dyan, Okay. So, itong tatlo na ito, importante. Ito naman si Rene Descartes, importanteng pag-usapan natin kasi meron siyang error. Error that even today, most of you still carry with you as you live your lives. Meron tayong tinatawag na Descartes error. Descartes error. Yan, pinaliwanag yan ng isang, neurologist ng, Harvard University Medical Center. And diyan ang ating pag-uusapan. Pero ano yung error na yan, mamaya na yan, oh. So balik muna tayo kay Alan Turing, yan. Okay. Si Alan Turing ay, umimbento ng tinatawag nating Turing's Test. Yan. Ano ba yung Turing's Test? Ito, basahin natin. Turing's Test, the Turing Test, originally called Imitation Game, which by the way, is also the same title, Imitation Game, noong biography ni Alan Turing and how he helped save 12 million lives during World War II. Panoodin niyo if you have time, nandyan yan sa Wikipedia, sorry, sa Netflix, at saka nandyan yan sa mga, alam niyo na, mga illegal movie websites ng India. Yung mga Indiano, napakahilig sa mga illegal. Okay, let me read. The Turing Test, originally called the Imitation Game by Alan Turing in 1950, is a test of a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior, equivalent to, or better yet, indistinguishable from that of a human. So, how did we perform Turing's test? Like I said, ginawa na natin yan dati. Pinag-usapan na natin. You take a room. Alright? One room, say that's room A. Take another room and say that's room B. And in one of the rooms, you put a human, although you do not know which room. You only know that the human is in one of the rooms. And then in the other room, you put a computer, a machine. Yan, no? Kasi by 1950s, uso na yung computer, yung IBM, di ba? ENIAC, the ENIAC version of the computer based on Turing's work, ENIAC version ng United States Navy, kung natatandaan nyo, kinuwento ko yan, ha? So, yung commercial version ng ENIAC ng US Navy, available na noong 1950s. Now, Turing says, put the human in one of the rooms, although you do not know which room where the human is. And then you put the machine, the computer, in one of the rooms, although you do not know which room it is in. And then he says, what you do, you make a guess. You make a guess where the human is and where the computer is. Now, when you make the guess, you base your guess on your interview of whoever is inside the room using a telex machine. What's a telex? I explained it to you earlier. Yung telex ay isang machine na may typewriter. At the same time, yung typewriter nakakonekta sa isang phone line. And then yung typewriter sends the signals in the equivalent signals in telegraphic given our Morse code telegraphic system. And then yung telex may printer. And then dun sa printer lalabas yung paper as you type. Lalabas yung tinype mo, message mo. Lalabas yung tinype ng kausap mo, message niya. Ergo, you communicate with whoever is in the room using the telex machine and therefore walang advantage na yung voice ng human ang nakikita mo o ang nadidinig mo. Now, you interview them and based on your interview, you make the guess where the person is and where the computer is. Now, this is the point. It is actually possible that the computer will fool you and make you believe that in fact the computer is the person, indistinguishable indistinguishable, ay ano ba 'to? Sandali, yan. Indistinguishable from the human based on your interview and exhibits intelligent behavior equivalent to the human. Yun ang pinag-uusapan natin. Now kapagka ganyan na ina-interview niyo and then you make the guess and then your guess is wrong, therefore yung by definition, yung machine has fooled you to believe that it is a person, then that machine is by definition artificially intelligent. Yan. Ngayon dinagdagan pa yan ano, paliwanag ni Alan Turing. He says, if you plot the level of error, which means the level of capacity of the machine to fool you as the interviewer, the interlocutor, the capacity of the machine to fool you and make you believe that it is a person, ipa-plot mo rito from 0% error to 100% error. Now, ang sinasabi ni Alan Turing ngayong 1950s, noong 1950s, 1950, beginning 1950, across a timeline from T's of 0 to T's of n, sabi niya, yung 1950s, practically zero yung level of error. Pero he says that will not stay like that forever. He says as time goes by, gagaling at gagaling yung computers, and then computers will help you make computers, will help you make better computers, will help you make better computers. And then dadating ang punto na yung error mo ay 50%. Pag ang error mo ay 50% na, sabi niya, by definition, artificially intelligent na yung kausap mo. 50-50. Hindi ka nakakasigurado kung tao o human. Kung tao or machine. Now, if you have a triangle, say you have a triangle, and of course it has 3 angles, the point here is this. It is impossible, that's the word, impossible for you to have a triangle with more than 3 angles. Okay? Impossible to have a triangle with, say, 4 angles. Hindi pwede. That's impossible. However, focus here. When you say 50% error, making a guess with your Turing test, that is not at all impossible. That is in fact possible, although maybe improbable, but possible. Yan. Meaning to say, in theory, theoretically, artificial intelligence is possible. And so, beginning with the 1950, nagkaroon ng mga academics, mostly philosophers. Nagkaroon ng mga academics, mostly philosophers, nagkaroon ng academic, epistemic community. The members of which are all interested in artificial intelligence. And dahil dun sa community na yan, na mostly originally philosophers, nagkaroon tayo ng discipline of artificial intelligence. Yan. Yan nagsimula yan sa paper ni Alan Turing. Yan. Okay. There you go. Okay. Turing's test. Now, sinabi ko naman sa inyo, panoodin ninyo sa YouTube, yung GPT-3. GPT-3 is a primordial form. Pakinggan GPT-3 is a primordial form of artificial intelligence. You can talk with it, you can chat with it. Ito siya. Pwede nyo interviewin. Yan siya, oh. Okay, nakita nyo? That's GPT-3. You can watch that if you like. Okay? Can fool you and make you think that the machine you're talking to is a person. It's artificial intelligence, but that's just a primordial form of artificial intelligence. Later on, we expect artificial general intelligence, but I'll explain that later. Sa ano yan. Okay. Now, ito yung interest natin. Ay, nawala. Saan napapunta yung Lintrish na? Nawala yung aking Jamboard. Where's my Jamboard? Okay. Ito. So, Alan Turing, check. Tapos na tayo dyan. Sabi nga natin, inimbento niya ang Turing's Test. And therefore, nagkaroon ng discipline of artificial general intelligence. Discipline of artificial intelligence. Leading to many things that we now appreciate these days. Now, eto ngayon si Gilbert Ryle. Si Alan Turing, 1930s to 1940s. Si Claude Shannon earlier, 1930s yung kanyang work, although later, meron pa siyang idinagdag. So literally, contemporary sila. Si Gilbert Ryle, contemporary din. Si Gilbert Ryle, professor ng Oxford University. He was the chief editor of Mind, one of the most important journals of philosophy ever in the whole world. Now, as a young man, in 1949, as a young man in 1949, he published a book, The Concept of Mind. Ito yan. Binigay ko sa inyo yung link niya, basahin niyo. Ito yung description sa kanya ng Wikipedia. The Concept of Mind is a 1949 book by philosopher Gilbert Ryle, in which the author argues that the mind is a philosophical illusion, hailing chiefly from René Descartes, sustained by logical errors and category mistake which have become habitual. Yan. Okay. Natatandaan, noong panahon ng Industrial Revolution sa England, si George Bull, sabi niya, palso ang ating concept of mathematics. So, ni-reinvent niya yung mathematics. In the process of reinventing mathematics, na-reinvent niya yung logic and became, from Aristotelian logic, now, mathematical logic. And of course, now we know from mathematical logic na invento yung computer technology. There was a need to reinvent mathematics. Bakit? Kasi merong contradiction. At alam na natin, yung contradiction has to do with the so-called the concept of impossible numbers. Impossible numbers like the value of the pi. So sabi ni George Bull, we cannot define mathematics as the study of measurement or magnitude, which led him to redefine and say, well, mathematics is about relations, not about measurement or magnitude, but more importantly about relations. And measurement or magnitude are just accidents. Alright, so ni-reinvent natin yung mathematics leading to reinvention of logic. Well, ito ngayon. Similarly, sabi ni Gilbert Ryle, si Gilbert Ryle, pilosopo, addict saan? Sa coherence. Remember, magmula nung panahon ni Pythagoras, ang mga pilosopo addict sa coherence kasi gusto natin harmony, gusto natin coherence. May mga nakita siyang contradictions doon sa ating concept of mind. You see, remember, when you have a language, you have terms. Terms you use as tools to identify concepts. Now, in other words, your terms, your concepts get to become what you call conceptual framework. Now, on the basis of your conceptual framework, you establish your set of rules that you live your lives with. And these rules are called theoretical framework. In science, we call them theories, these rules. These rules are generalizations. You have a framework of generalizations that is dependent on a framework of definitions of your terms. Now, some terms are self-contradictory. We have a name for that. So, hanapin ninyo ha, baka isama ko sa examen. Ay, o nga pala, nabigyan ko na kayo ng examen. Ano? Oxymoron ang tawag sa mga uh, self-negating terms. Well, sabi ni Gilbert Ryle, yung concept ng mind ay may problema. At yung problema yan, nagsimula kay Rene Descartes. Ganito, no? Balikan natin si Rene Descartes. Ano nangyari kay Rene Descartes? Si Rene Descartes ay nabuhay noong 1600s. Yan. Nung panahon na yan, buhay pa si Galileo, early 1600s. Si Descartes, kaibigan ni Galileo. Si Galileo at si Descartes, parehong geek. Parehong mahilig sa mathematics and what later would be known as science and mahilig sa geometry. Yan. Ngayon, ano nangyari kay Galileo? Si Galileo, sabi niya, tama si Copernicus. Si Copernicus kasi after he died, meron siyang last will. Yung last will niya, i-publish yung kanyang libro. Yung kanyang libro, nung na-publish, sinasabi, the Earth cannot be the center of the universe. He says, at least in the case of the solar system, it is the sun. And therefore, solar system, it is the sun that the center of the movement of all the planets. And sabi ni Galileo, meron akong telescope. And yung telescope ko, if you look at Jupiter, ang daming buwan, moons ng Jupiter. And the moons of Jupiter revolve around Jupiter, not around the Earth. Sabi ni Galileo, using my telescope, if you look at Venus, Venus will look like a first quarter moon. Sometimes will look like a second quarter moon. Sometimes will look a half moon, will look like a last half moon or a last quarter moon. Sabi niya, that is because yung Venus, pag nakikita nyo with a telescope, ayan o, tinatamaan ng shadows ng Earth. And pag kinalculate nyo mathematically, lumalabas na Venus is not revolving around the Earth, it's revolving around the Sun. And so, sabi niya, tama si Copernicus, we have empirical proof. Nagalit ang simbahan. Sabi nung simbahan, putang ina mo, sira ulo ka. Bakit? Only man is created in the image of God. Therefore, he's the most important creation. Therefore, his home is the most important place in the universe. Therefore, it must be the center of the universe. That's the reason why, says the church, if you throw anything into the sky, they all go back to earth because everything loves the earth. Puta na. Sunugin yan si Galileo for blasphemy. Naloko na. Kaya anong kinalaman sa usapan natin? Wala, gusto ko lang ikwento si Galileo. Ganito, susunugin dapat si Galileo, yung isang kasama niya, si Giovanni Bruno, sinunog, alive, for saying the same thing. Then here now is Galileo coming up to be burned at the stake. Buti na lang may estudyante, yung mga estudyante niya, kasi matanda na si Galileo noon eh. Yung mga estudyante niya, pinagtanggol si Galileo, sabi ng mga estudyante, kabait na mama nito matalino daming contribution sa society, wag na nating sunugin. Ay di, hindi nga sinunog, life imprisonment na lang. Yan. Kaya pagka kayo ay may nabalita ha, Mr. Herolaga, ay pagka ako ay susunugin, ipagtatanggol mo ako ha, Mr. Lawrence ha, Mr. Angeles, pagtatanggol niyo ako, ay delikado. Ngayon, ganun ano nangyari? Sabi ni Rene Descartes, Hindi ko maitatakwil si Galileo kasi kilala ko yung mga si Galileo, mabuting tao at alam mo ang mga sinasabi niya. Kaya lang si Rene Descartes, kagaya ko ay estudyante ng mga Jesuit. At si Rene Descartes ay his whole life until even his adult life all the way to his death ay devout Catholic. Pero hindi ko kagaya kasi nag-UP ako eh. Putangina, buti na lang nag-UP ako kung hindi uto-uto pa rin ako ng mga Jesuits ngayon. Sabi ni Rene Descartes, papaano ko mare-reconcile nung ginagawa ng mga Jesuita sa aking kaibigang si Galileo? And so Descartes came up with a plan. See, if you remember sa geometry, you have your axioms. Out of your axioms, you establish the whole system of rules, all rules known to mankind involving space, under a very systematic form. Inverted pyramid, ano? At yan din ang ginamit na model for unification of mathematics if you remember. Pero si Rene Descartes sabi niya, what I want to do is to unify all knowledge of mankind into a single system so that I can relate religion with science. Yan. And so, for example, inimbento ni Descartes yung Cartesian coordinate system to relate geometry with algebra. That's the reason for it. Now, ito yung sinasabi natin. Rene Descartes had a problem. See, Rene Descartes noticed that humans exist with their minds. In other words, you pick out a human, he will have a mind. But in addition to his mind, the human will have a body. Yan. Okay? Now, ito yung punto. We know that minds affect bodies. For example, ikaw ay nagja-jogging. Halimbawa ako. Every once in a while, I participate in marathons, although lately hindi na. Magpa-practice ako sa academic oval ng UP. Iikot ako ng yung buong UP campus, iikot ako ng, depende, 10 kilometers, 26 kilometers. Supposing naisipan kong tatakbo ko ng 26 kilometers, di takbo ako. Pagdating ko ng 20 kilometers, alam yung nasa isip ko, sabi, putang ina, ba't ko ginagawa ito? Kasira ng ulo ko. Yamot na ako. Now, at one end of the academic oval, I can see from afar, nandun sa AS steps, Palmahall steps, yung aking crush. May crush ako eh. Hindi ko sasabihin sa inyo kung sino. Baka isumbong nyo sa asawa ko eh. Ngayon, pag nakita ko yung crush ko, itong mapapansin ninyo. Pagdating doon sa harap ng Palmahall, bigla akong lalakas ang katawan at para akong bagong takbo lamang kahit na nakatakbo na ako ng 20 kilometers. Bakit? Kasi the thought in my mind na makikita ako ng crush ko at makikita, wow man, ang macho ni Prof. De Villa. Oh my God! Just the thought will affect my body and I will have more endorphins and I will have so much hormones that my body will be stronger. Yan. Magkakaroon ako ng adrenaline surge. Bakit? Because of my thoughts in my mind. So, yun ang sinasabi natin. Sabi ni Descartes, ganun din. Sabi ni Descartes, minds affect bodies. But then, bodies affect minds. Example, bodies affect minds. Kunyari, halimbawa, nagmarathon nga ako. O kayo, nagmarathon kayo. And then, natapos ninyo, 42 kilometers. Dito ang tuwa ka po, I finished the marathon non-stop. Di pagdating ng gabi, party. Masakit ang katawan mo, pero masaya ka eh. So, party. And then, wee hours of the morning, nagpa-party pa kayo, naalala mo, ay putay na, may exam kami kay Prof. De Villa mamaya at hindi take home. So, anong nangyari? Cramming ka ngayon, aral ka. And then, pagka-cramming mo, nagmamadali ka, pumunta ka na ng UP, and nakalimutan mo mag-breakfast. And then here you are, you take the exam. Pagbuklat mo nung questionnaire, putay na, mathematical logic. Naloko na. Di sabi mo ngayon, putay na, anong mangyari dito? The point is, dahil pagod na pagod ka, hirap na hirap ka, chances are mababa ang grade mo. Yung iyong exam, hindi mo masasagot masyado. Tama? Yan. Yan ang nangyayari. So, minds affect bodies, but bodies affect minds. May problema. Ano yung problema? You see, if you have a body, your body can be measured in terms of length. Okay, length, width, and height. Di ba? In other words, your bodies exist in space, or what we call space-time. Not only does your body exist in space, it exists across time. Yan. Now, while your body is in space-time, what about your mind? Is your mind in space-time? Yun ang tanong. Oh, is your mind in space-time? Big question. O, sagot nga. Somebody, lagay ko din sa chat. Is mind in space-time? Pag sinagot niyong yes, then sasabihin niyo nasa kilikili, nasa ilong, nasa tenga, in between your eyes, where is your mind? May isang estudyante, sabi ng estudyante, Sir, I think my mind is under my tongue. Oh, sabi ko, bakit? Under the tongue. Sabi sa akin na Miss Shana, ay under the tongue daw, gawa ng pagka siya ay nag-iisip, ay nagmumove daw yung tongue niya. Pag nagka-calculate daw siya ng equations, nagmumove yung tongue niya, ay ibig sabihin ay nasa ilalim ng tongue yung kanyang mind. Let's just put it this way. Sabi ni Rene Descartes, ay the mind is not in time-space, in space-time. No. So we have a problem. What's the problem? Minds affect bodies. Bodies affect minds, but they are not in the same place. So how does that happen? How can two things not in the same place affect one another? And so this is what we today call, thanks to Rene Descartes, the mind-body problem. Descartes could not reconcile, could not cohere how the mind affects the body and the body affects the mind. And ergo, the expression mind-body problem. Yan. Ngayon, ay, sus Mariosel, pabulo ko magsulat. Mahirap magsulat na gamit ninyo ay mouse. Okay. It's called the mind-body problem. Sino umimbento dyan? Si Rene Descartes. So, ito yung tanong. So, given the mind-body problem, anong sagot ni Rene Descartes? Hulaan ninyo. Anybody answer the question? How do you think Rene Descartes answered the question? What question? How is it possible that the mind affects the body and the body affects the mind even if they're not in the same place? Wala ko ng tinapay. Nadidinig nyo ba ako, Mr. Angeles? Mr. Jose? Ay, hindi pala, Miss Jose? Are you there? Am I talking to anyone? Okay. Sabi ni Rene Descartes, the relationship between the mind and the body is a mystery. Cannot be known to man. It is a mystery of God to be embraced with faith. Miss Jose, mystery daw to be embraced with faith. Salamat Miss Jose sa sagot mo, ha. Yan, mystery to be embraced with faith ay the true Catholic that he is. Diyan ako lamang, putang ina pumasok ako ng UP, eh, hindi na ako niyo puwedeng sabihin sigurong Katoliko. Puwede akong tawagin yung Katoliko, bastos na Katoliko. So, magmula nung panahon ni Descartes hanggang ngayon sa panahon ninyo hindi niyo masagot 'yan. Yan. So, sabi ni Gilbert Ryle 'yan, balik tayo kay Gilbert Ryle ano? Sabi ni Gilbert Ryle, kaya importante si Gilbert Ryle, eh. Ito nga, sabi nitong mama na ito, ay putang ina, balikan natin yang usapan na 'yan. And sabi niya, let's apply logic. Our knowledge of mathematical logic, logic in general, ay apply natin dun sa ating usapan. Yan. Ngayon, ito nga ang ginawa ni Gilbert Ryle. Nag-publish siya ng libro, as you can see here. Ito yung libro, the original first edition. Itong libro na ito, published in 1949, is all about, sandali ha, it is all about contradictions that ay nawala, naloko na, nasaan yung it is all about the contradictions that the concept of mind, in others, the traditional concept of mind that we have. Yan. Okay? Meron tayong tinatawag nating traditional concept of mind. That's why nandito yun, eh, concept of mind, ano? Ang tawag natin traditional. Yung traditional concept of mind, madaming contradictions. In fact, sabi ni Gilbert Ryle, yung mind and body problem is just one of the contradictions. Sabi niya, isa lang yan. In fact, napakadami niyan. Sabi niya, puta na. Maubos ang araw natin pag pag-uusapan natin lahat. Let me just mention to you one more contradiction. Okay, so meron tayong paradox or contradiction, we call it the mind and body problem. Ano, isa yan. Let me give you another one. Okay. It involves the concept of actions. You see, actions of humans can either be rational, can either be rational or irrational. Yan. Let me illustrate. Okay, let me illustrate. So, I call up the house and I tell my wife, honey bunch, yeah, that's how I call my wife, honey bunch, hindi ako makakauwi ngayon ng maaga. I have been promoted and everybody is so happy at the department, they're giving me a party. And I do not know what time makakauwi ako. So, pasensya ka na honey bunch ha, hindi ako makapag-dinner ngayon, mag-isa ka lang mag-dinner. Eh di sabi nung ni honey bunch, eh, okay lang, sige, go. And anyway, tomorrow is a weekend. So here I am, party. And then I go home at night, late in the night, wee hours of the morning, I slump into bed. And then my honey bunch looks at me and says, ay, kawawa naman. Pagod na pagod ang asawa ko. So in the morning, total weekend, I'll prepare breakfast for him and I'll bring it on his bed. Breakfast in bed. And I'll open the windows and the birds and the bees are around, etc. So she cooks early in the morning and then sometime almost mid-morning, she knocks on the door and then opens the door and says, Popsicle toast, wake up little rosebud, popsicle toast, gising ka na, ito na yung breakfast mo, ha? Miss Angel, Miss Jose, ha? Original sa akin yan, ha? Huwag mong kokopyahin. Popsicle toes, wake up, little rosebud. Eto ngayon, binuksan yung bintana. The birds and the bees are around, sunshine coming in, early morning. And then, a bee enters the room. Na-sting yung asawa ko. Nabuhos yung breakfast sa mukha ko. Ang tawag dyan, irrational. That kind of action is called irrational. Nabuhos. Hindi sinasadya. It's a matter of cause and effect relationship. Let me explain. Cause and effect. Cause and effect relationship lang yan. Para lang yang may billiard ball na tinamaan ng isang billiard ball. Ulitin natin, tingin kayo din eh. May billiard ball in motion. May isang billiard ball ay at rest. Tinamaan ng billiard ball ay di lalakad din ito. Yan. And yung bagay na yan is just a matter of cause and effect. Cause and effect relationship. Nothing that has to do with thinking and decision making. Now, take another situation. What's the other situation? The other situation is, here I am, slumped in bed, 3 o'clock in the morning, wee hours of the morning. My wife says, okay, I'm going to prepare breakfast in bed for him, and here she is. She knocks on the door, and she says, wake up, little rosebud, wake up. Opens the window, birds and the bees are around, sunshine coming in. And then, she sniffs. Putang ina, ang bango. And then, lumapit sa akin, inamoy-amoy ako sa leeg. Ang putang ina, pabango. Anong pabango ito? Ano bang mga pabangong alam ninyo? French vanilla. Oh my God! French vanilla. Hindi ako nagpe-French vanilla. Tapos tiningnan ako sa leg. Oh my God! May pock marks ako sa leg. Oh my God! Tapos tiningnan yung aking polo shirt. Putang ina, may lipstick. Pagkatapos tiningnan yung pocket ko ng aking polo, merong panyo. Oh my God, that's not mine. Premise 1, premise 2, premise 3. Conclusion po, tayo na ibinuhos yung breakfast sa mukha ko. Isinama pa yung mainit na kape. Yan. So, yung rational, ibinuhos. Sa makatuwid, merong pag-isip na nangyari. Yan. So, ibinuhos. So, eto ngayon tayo. An action is rational when together with the action comes some kind of thinking or decision making. So, may action, merong thinking. Pag walang thinking, irrational. Pag may thinking, rational. Yan. So, far so good, nasusundan ha? So, kaya siya rational, precisely, dahil merong thinking involved. Pag walang thinking, then irrational siya. Yan. Pag walang thinking, only action, then irrational yan. Cause and effect relationship lang yan. Ngayon, eto ngayon ang sabi ni Gilbert. Notice, the word think is a verb. Therefore, it involves some kind of action. In fact, thinking itself is an action. Yan. Ngayon, kung siya ay action, that only means it can either be rational, uli, or irrational. Kasi action siya eh. Ngayon, pag siya ay rational, ang ibig sabihin, meron kang action, uli, plus thinking uli. But then, this means it is either rational or irrational. But then, if it is rational, then this means siya ay action na may kasamang thinking. Putang ina, walang katapusan. So, you have here a paradox. Let's call it let's call it Ryle's paradox. Ryle's paradox. Paradoxical. Okay. So far, so good. Ryle's paradox. Pasensya na, Miss Jose, ha? Naiintindihan ba, Miss Jose? Somebody, tell me. Nasusundan ba, Mr. Angeles? Ha? Okay. So, meron kang action with corresponding thinking. This action becomes rational. Yan. Salamat, Mr. Labios. Now, ulitin natin. Merong action together with thinking. This action becomes rational. But then thinking itself is an action, which means it has to be rational. For it to be rational, thinking itself must have a corresponding thinking. And therefore, this becomes rational. But then this thinking itself has to be rational. So, for it to be rational, there must be a corresponding thinking. But then this thinking, wala nang katapusan. Now, the moment you realize that, then you are open to saying, well, my concept of mind is something not so reliable. It brings with it paradoxes. It brings with it contradictions. And so, here you are, just like George Bull, may paradox may contradiction dun sa concept of mathematics. And so, sabi niya, let me reinvent mathematics. Here now is Gilbert Ryle. He says, puta na, I have an entire book. Sabi niya, look, there's an entire book about the paradoxes involving our concept of mind. This book has many chapters. And all the chapters in this book involve some kind of contradiction. And so, sabi ni Gilbert Ryle, ganito ang gagawin natin. Hanap tayo ng paraan na mapalitan or ma-reinvent ang traditional concept of mind. Yan. Bago mo naman ma-reinvent yung traditional concept of mind, dapat malaman mo ano bang kasalanan, ha? Bakit ba nagkaganyan? Yun ang tanong. So, eto ngayon. What is the root of the error? What is the root of the paradoxes? Not only one, but many. Yan. Okay. Doon sa libro, ang sagot ni Gilbert Ryle ay very simple. René Descartes' error, what is it? Well, he calls it category mistake. Category mistake. It's a logical kind of error. It's an error in reasoning. Actually, it's a very simple error. Now, category mistake, yun ang tawag ni Gilbert Ryle, is in plain English actually, is called reification. Reification. First things first, let me explain what a category mistake is. See, ang gusto nating mangyari, remember, is gusto natin yung traditional concept of mind, we will replace it. So that's the target. We want to drop our traditional concept, drop it, and replace it with something else. What shall we replace it with? Ano yung replacement? Hindi pa natin alam. Okay? So, balik tayo din eh. Anong ibig sabihin ng category mistake? Ganito. Imagine Professor De Villa, me, may kaibigan dumagat. Nung aktivista ako, lagi ako nandyan sa Sierra Madre. Nagmamountaineering kami dyan, among other things. May nakaging kaibigan kaming mga dumagat. You know, may mga dumagat tayo, even today, who have never seen a town, who have never seen a building, who have never been out of the forest. They've lived there all their lives. Ngayon, ganito, sabihin na lang natin may kaibigan akong hindi alam kung anong sibilisasyon. Sinama ko sa UP at ito yung pangako ko. Oh, Kabaro, Baro, yung isang kaibigan ko doon, Baro ang pangalan eh. Kabaro, sama ka sa akin ha, punta tayo ng UP. Ituturo ko sa inyo ang university. Yan, yung aming university, ipapakita ko sa inyo. Eh di sama nga siya. So, baba kami sa Pilcoa, itinuro ko, eto ho ang University Avenue, yan yung ating yan ang ating gate, yan yung si malakas at maganda, yan ang ating University Avenue, yan ang ating mga security guard. Yung mga security guard na yan ay uto-uto ng mga pulis, yan ang aming mga pulis. Kaya kita ninyo, kalalaki ng tiyan, yung iba dyan ay sabungero, may mga patama sa weteng at saka sa sabong paglinggo dyan sa likod ng krus na ligas. Yan! Ay ano pa, ay, yan ang aming Quezon Hall, yan ang administration building. Ay yan ho ang Vargas Museum, yan ang faculty center na nasunog at ito yung Palma Hall na ako dati ang may hawak niyan, na building administrator, ito. So itinuro ko, yan ang aming mga propesor. Ay nako, napakarami diyang mga bastos kagaya ko. O yan ang aming mga estudyante. Nako, mas bastos yung mga yan. Eh, nakikita ko kung anong mga isinusulat doon sa Diliman Files. Nako, yak! Ngayon ay ari ang aming College of Education, Business Administration, School of Economics, College of Law, Engineering, and so on. Eto ngayon, hapon na. Pagdating nung hapon, sabi sa akin na Miss Shana Rain, noong aking kaibigan dumagat, ay Prof, ay pagod na ako sa iksi naman na rin aking binti na kalaki mong humakbang kadami nating pinuntahan, pagod na ako, uwi na tayo. Ay sige, sabi ko. Ay pero sabi niya, bago tayo umuwi, ay ituro mo naman sa akin ang university. Nye. Naituro ko na lahat tatanungin pa ako. Ay nasaan ka ho yung university? Naloko na. And that's where you make a category mistake. To think that a concept that is abstract in nature like a university is of the same category as tables and chairs and buildings and students and professors, magkaiba yun eh. When you mix the categories together, you commit a logical error. As if to say, oh, I have a very honest door. I have a very trustworthy door. Or sasabihin mo, my love for you is 7 by 3 by 6. Naloko na. So, meron tayong, sa language natin, meron tayong mga categories. And the categories involve logical rules. Now, more importantly, that we now commit a category mistake. Bakit nagkaroon ng category mistake? Then we ask further the question, saan ba nanggaling yung problema natin? And this is the answer. You see, sabi ni Rene Descartes, okay, triangles exist, circles exist, numbers exist. The value of the pi exists. Okay. The value of the pi exists. Now, what's the problem? So you have the pi, it exists. Now you have tables. You have tables. Okay, tables. You have chairs. Okay, you have chairs. You have buildings. Okay, you have a house. You have trees. What's the point? Numbers exist, tables exist. Now, tables, chairs, and buildings and trees exist in space, or what we call space-time. Now, in other words, they exist in a place. Conclusion, sabi ni Rene Descartes, there must be a place where numbers exist, where the value of pi exists. See, remember, hindi pa nabubuhay si George Boole niyan. Yung concept ni Rene Descartes ng numbers is still the ancient Greek concept of numbers, meaning to say measurement or magnitude. And so, if measurement or magnitude exists, it must exist in a place. And what are minds? Yan. Now, balik tayo sa akin, ha? Sabi ni Rene Descartes, tables and chairs and bodies exist. And they exist in a place. Now, we have numbers, thoughts about love, thoughts about justice. They exist. Therefore, they must also exist in a place. And the place where they exist will give it the name, the mind. If tables and chairs exist in space, thoughts exist in the mind. And what is the mind? It's a place. It is a place that exists in that place, the mind. Saan nag-exist ang mind? Doon sa place called the mind. Eto, what's the premise? Remember, premise. What's the premise? Tables and chairs and human bodies exist in a place. What's the conclusion? Minds, numbers, love, democracy, justice, they exist in a place. Mali. There is no rule of inference. There is no rule of induction even that will justify that because tables and chairs exist in a place, therefore minds and concepts like love and freedom and justice must also exist in a place. Does not follow. There you go. Your category mistake. It does not follow that if tables and chairs exist in a place, therefore minds and numbers and love and freedom must exist in a place. Yeah. So, may category mistake. Does not follow na merong place, ang space, called space-time, ang existence ng tables and chairs. Therefore, may place din yung existence ng numbers and the value of pi and geometric figures. Mali yan. So, what are we now saying? Let's drop this bullshit. Our traditional concept of mind. Now, what do we replace it with? Ito yung sagot. Sabi ni Gilbert, Ryle, ganito. To say that someone has a mind is to say, in the traditional sense, someone has a ghost or a spirit in a machine. The body, the human body. Now, when you talk of ghosts, that means you talk of mysterious things. Now, sabi ni Gilbert, I'll put na, that's bullshit. I don't want to invent something like a ghost or a spirit. So, if you do not want to say that, then how do you say someone has a mind? To say that someone has a mind is to say that someone has some capacity to take in inputs, process this inputs and generate some corresponding output. Let me explain it further. Okay? Take a human. Take a parrot. Ay, nako, wait lang kayo ng konti ha. Mahirap mag-drawing ng parrot. Ay, putris, kahirap magturo. Ang hirap kumita. Yan, parrot. Pwede na, ano? Narin yung kanyang ano. Okay, we have a parrot somewhere. Parrot na mukhang eagle. Take a machine. Okay, a machine. Okay. So, ano ngayon? Okay, this is your machine. The situation is this. You ask them to recite. Recite what? Kumain ka na? Yan. So they all recite. You recite as the human, kumain ka na? In other words, you ask them to say, to express. Let me repeat. To express. Kumain ka na? Yan. Sabi mo, you express, kumain ka na? Sabi nung parrot, kumain ka na? Sabi nung computer, kumain ka na? Yan. Miss Shana Rain, makinig po ha, pakisagot. Tama, mali. Miss Shana Rain ha, tama, mali. Mr. Agimbag, tama, mali. Ito yung tanong. Ang sasabihin ng isang tao na naniniwala sa traditional concept of mind, ganito. Traditional concept of mind believer will say, only the human can express, kumain ka na. Because a parrot only parrots or mimics. Similarly, a machine can only parrot or mimic. Only humans can express. Why? Because only humans have minds. And what is a mind? A mind is a mysterious ghost in the machine. Only God knows what. Yeah. Yan ang sagot. Tama, mali. Mr. Agimbag, Miss Shana Rain. Ganyan ang sagot ng traditional concept of mind believer. Tama ka? Pasagot naman. Habang ako'y nandun na iinom. Tama, mali. Tama. Yan, Mr. Anggagbag. Ngayon, ganitong situation. Tama. Tama po. Yan. Only humans have minds. Parrots, parrot. Machines, parrot. So, isulat natin. Parrots, parrot. They do not express. They only parrot. They only mimic. Machines, parrot. And why do we say this? Because only humans have minds. That mysterious entity. Yeah. Ngayon, ganito take the situation. What's the situation? The situation is in the room, in a store, say a computer store, with all the computer gadgets around. And merong pinto, air-conditioned room, may pinto. Pag may pumasok sa pinto, merong bell na magre-ring. So somebody enters the room. Sabi ko, kumain ka na. Bakit? Because facial recognition, na-recognize ko, I can see with my eyes. I can hear with my ears na may pumasok. And there you go, may pumasok and I recognize kapatid ko. So ang tanong ko, kumain ka na? Yan. Yung parrot, trained na pag nakikita niya rin ang kapatid ko, sasabihin ng parrot, kumain ka na, kumain ka na. Yan. Yung aking computer, may facial recognition, may sensor, may facial recognition processor. Nakita kapatid ko, tatanungin din, kumain ka na? Yan. Now, what's the point? If you think in these terms, if you think in these terms, if you think in these terms, you will say only humans have minds and parrots parrot and machines parrot. But if you think in these terms, you will conclude all of them have minds. You will say the human has a mind, check. The parrot has a mind, check. The machine has a mind, check. Why? Because all of them have the capacity. Remember, all of them have the capacity to take in inputs. May mata, may tenga ako. Yung parrot may mata, may tenga. Yung computer may sensor, can take in inputs. We can process these inputs. I have the rules in my mind, given my conceptual framework and my theoretical framework. Same with the parrot, meron siyang rules in her mind. Or meron siyang rules sa kanyang brain. And same with the computer, meron siyang computer programs. And then given all of these inputs, we now process the inputs and generate corresponding output. And there you go, given the rules, we say, kumain ka na. So, if we're talking of capacity, all of us have capacity. The capacity to think. No, hindi ko na share, ulitin natin ha. Naloko na ako. Okay, share ko ulit. Balik tayo din eh. Ano? Ang sabi natin, if we're looking at our capacity to take in inputs, process input, generate output, then we can say the human is a mind because we have that capacity. The parrot has a mind, we have that capacity. The computer has a mind, we have that capacity. That capacity to take in inputs, process these inputs, and generate some output. There you go. All of these have minds. Yan. So, anong ibig sabihin? Well, why is it we feel parrots and machines have no minds? Why is it that we feel they have no minds? Yun ang tanong. Kasi very naturally, we think that they have no minds. Well, focus on the capacity. See, the human brain has somewhere between 80 to 100 billion neurons. Let me repeat, 80 to 100 billion neurons. You count 1 billion seconds, it will take you 32 years to count, Miss Shanna Rain. Mr. Agenbag, ganun kadami. And we have up to 100 billion neurons. Now, on top of that, Mr. Agimbag, a single neuron will have a minimum of 1,000 connections, given your dendritic trees and your synapses, 1,000 connections up to 30,000 connections each. Ang bawat isa. So 30,000 times 100 billion, po tayo na, sangkatutak na zero yan. You're talking here of trillions. More than all the stars in our galaxy. Ganun ang capacity ng ating brains. More than all the stars of our galaxy. Can you imagine? Now, the human brain is composed of, the human brain has embedded in it many rules. I'll show you one rule. Very easy. I'll show you one rule. What are the rules that involve the human brain? Okay. Here's one rule. Look at this segment. And then I draw the same length of the same segment in parallel to it. Okay. There you go. So, sukatin ninyo sa inyong mga cellphone and computer, pareho lang ng haba yan. Now, supposing dagdagan ko yung illustration nito. Notice the effect. What's the effect? The effect is this seems to be longer and this seems to be shorter. See, the human brain is programmed with a rule to what? Triangulate. Mahabang kwento yan, but yung capacity natin to triangulate has to do with our eyes on the same planes and has to do with us being primates. Primates used to jump when we were still primordial primate forms, Mr. Labios, kagaya ng sa kagaya ng mga lemurs and tarsiers, we move from one tree to another. And yung dating mga organisms na nandun sa side ng mata, nag-evolve pumunta sa harap, naging on the same plane. At pagka on the same plane yung mata mo, then you can now triangulate. When your eyes are on the same plane, your eye and your eye on the same plane, then you can triangulate. And when you can triangulate, then your sense of distance is more reliable. Let me repeat. When your eyes are on the same plane, then that means you can triangulate. And when you can triangulate, that means your sense of distance will be more accurate. And therefore, when you jump from one tree to another, you have more chances of survival. And from becoming lemurs and tarsiers to later the Australopithecus africanus, to later the Homo erectus, to later the Homo neanderthalensis, Homo floresiensis, and Homo sapiens sapiens, na-retain natin yung ating programming to triangulate. And given our programming to triangulate, there you go. This appears to be longer, nagta-triangulate kayo eh. And this appears to be shorter. That's why if you look at the railroad, you seem to think that the railroad at some point, yung dalawang side ng railroad ay nagmi-meet. Pero hindi naman, kasi nagta-triangulate kayo. Okay. So, may programming tayo. Yung programming natin has to do with rules how we talk, rules how we walk, rules how we smell, many rules. Yan. Ngayon, let's talk about near-death experience. Nasagasaan ka ng kotse, pero buhay ka pa. Dinala ka sa ospital. And then, nandun ka sa operating room. But you're under comatose. So, nandun ka sa operating room. Ay, sorry. Mali. Ulitin natin. Nagkaroon ka ng near-death experience. Bakit? Kasi nasagasaan ka ng kotse. Dinala ka sa operating room. Doon sa operating room, ikaw ay under comatose. Under comatose. Now, under comatose ka, after na save ka, under comatose ka for 1 week and then you wake up. But when you wake up, everybody is surprised. Yan na nga ang near-death experience. Bakit? When you wake up, you ask your friends and your relatives the question, bakit nag-aaway yung aking doktor at saka yung nurse in the operating room? And you even mention, ang ganda-ganda naman ng operating room. Kasi ang nangyari, kunyari lang, ang nangyari ay yung regular operating room, hindi ka pwede kasi may inooperahan iba, dinala ka doon sa operating room ng pediatric section. Pediatrics para sa mga bata ay may mga naka-drawing, naka-painting doon sa mga wall na Walt Disney characters. And sabi mo, ang cute-cute naman ng operating room. And everybody is surprised. Bakit? Kasi everybody knows na the whole time you were under some comatose. And so they ask you, paano mo nalaman? And then here is your answer. Your near-death experience. Isip ka ngayon, putang ina, oo nga, no? Under comatose ako. Wait, I remember. I was hovering above the room, the operating room. I could see the doctor and the nurse while I'm being operated. I can see myself on the table. Nag-aaway sila and I can see all the walls of the operating room with all the illustrations of Walt Disney. Oh my God! I died. My soul hovered above my body, but for some reason, my soul went back to my body. Near-death experience. Yeah. Near-death experience has been reported for many centuries in all civilizations known to mankind. Now, this is the point. You see, if you think of a domain, say a domain called your mind, you have a program that makes you triangulate. You have a program that helps you walk. You have a program that helps you talk. You have a program that helps you solve problems. A program. Na marami kang program na tumatakbo habang ikaw ay awake. Kaso, nung ikaw ay nagka-comatose, ang nangyari, some of your programs do not work. Some of your programs do not work. When all your programs do not work, you die. But because you're only under some comatose, actually only some of your programs do not work. Now, given the remaining programs, you have inputs. Given your remaining programs, you have inputs. But your inputs are incomplete. Nevertheless, you still have your inputs. Okay, nasusundan ha? Now, given your incomplete inputs, what's going on? Because you are addicted to coherence as a human being, you now read between the lines. You read between the lines. Remember, you connect the dots. You connect the dots. You, in other words, bridge the gap. How do you connect the dots? You bridge the gap. You read between the lines based on your past or prior experience. Kaso, anong past or prior experience mo, Mr. Labios? Your past or prior experience, religious experience. Sa misa, sa kwento, sa librong nakikita, sa kwento ng nanay at tatay mo, and so many conversations. Given your past experience with religion, you now make your interpretation. And what's your interpretation? You have a soul, and you have an out-of-body experience, and there you go. But look, if you are a philosopher like me, somebody who is into philosophy of science and philosophy of artificial intelligence, my interpretation is very different. I do not have to invent a ghost in a machine. All I need to do is to invent that mental model that tells me humans are machines with some kind of programming. They can take in inputs, they can generate outputs based on their processing. And there you go. I have my own narrative, alternative to near-death experience having a soul. May soul ako, dalawang pa ako, may soul yan. Pero does not mean I have a soul, a magical ghost or spirit. No need for that. Now, balik tayo doon sa usapan natin. Why do we feel that parrots do not have minds? Why do we feel that? Why do we feel that machines do not have minds? You see, meron nga tayong 10 billion neurons eh. Now, may capacity yung parrot, may capacity yung machine, pero yung capacity nila compared sa atin, napakaliit. Let me repeat. Why do we feel that parrots do not have minds? That machines do not have minds? Kasi may kinalaman doon sa ating brains. You see, pinaliwanag ko na nga. Ito yung sun. So, ano naman kinalaman ng araw sa usapan natin? Ito yung sun. Ito yung aking glass of water. Look, when we're talking of mass of the glass of water compared to the mass of the sun, while in absolute terms, there is positive mass for my glass of water, in comparison to the sun, this glass of water is nothing. In other words, if you divide the mass of my glass of water by the mass of the sun, eh siguro ganito ang mangyayari. 0.0000, baka 10 kilometro, kulang pa. So, comparing the capacity of humans with their brains to the capacity of a machine is just like comparing the mass of your cup of tea to the mass of the sun. Yung brain natin, yun yung ating capacity as humans, yun yung sun, yung cup of tea ko, yun yung capacity nung computer. Yun yung capacity ng parrot. For practical purposes, but only for practical purposes, parrots and machines do not have minds. It's like saying, my cup of tea has a mass. No, it's nothing. It's zero. It's zilch compared to the mass of the sun. There you go. But in absolute terms, a parrot has a mind. A computer has a mind. Humans, parrots, computers have minds. And so we call this the dispositional concept of mind. What do we call it? We call it the dispositional concept of mind. Yung dispositional concept of mind comes from this expression. Okay? Yung dispositional concept of mind comes from this expression. Dali Ano nga ang sabi natin ito? Sabi natin, we will drop the traditional concept of mind. And what will we do? We will replace it with the dispositional concept of mind. Kaya dispositional concept, kasi ganito. Another word for capacity is the word disposition. Let me repeat. Another word for capacity is the word disposition. Or another word for capacity is the word potential. Potential. As the years have gone by, ang preference ng mga philosophers and scientists is this expression dispositional rather than capacity or potential. Ang choice is the word dispositional. There you have it. So, ay sorry, hindi ko pala na-share. Ulitin natin ha. 'To. Kaya dispositional ang tawag, dispositional concept of mind, kasi yung word capacity actually literally means disposition. A capacity or disposition to take in inputs, process these inputs, generate some corresponding output. Another way of saying that is not disposition, not capacity, but potential. In other words, to say someone has a mind is to say that someone has some potential to take in inputs, process these inputs, generate some corresponding output. There you go. So, ni-reinvent natin ang concept of mind. Now, ito yung result. Yung concept of mind na sinasabi natin, ginagamit ng neurologist, ng psychologist, ng biologist, ng anthropologist, ng philosopher, ng artificial intelligence engineer. You ask yourselves the question when you go home, which do you think is more useful, the traditional concept or the dispositional concept if your idea is to, if your purpose is to predict behavior of a community of animals, behavior of a community of machines, behavior of a community of people, behavior of an entire nation. Which would you rather use, the traditional concept of mind or the dispositional concept of mind? I think the answer is very obvious. Overtime na tayo ng 2 minutes. Maligayang araw po. Pasensya na, napa-overtime tayo. Ingat lagi. Salamat Mr. Labios, Mr. Inguena, Ms. Shana Rain sa mga sagot ninyo. Ingat po lagi. Bye-bye.